Hi, I'm Claire and this is Podcast Recommendations Part 4. This has been a little mini-series going on my channel, so if you'd like to go and check out parts 1, 2 and 3 to see my other podcast recommendations, I will put a card on the side of the screen about now. But without further ado, let's get into 4 more podcasts that I love and would recommend to everyone. The first show I want to talk about today is Ditch Diggers by Mur Lafferty and Matt Wallace. This is a show all about the business of being a writer. It's not about the craft of writing, it's about what it's like when your job, instead of digging ditches, is to write books, write film scripts, make stories in any kind of a way. They talk about the nitty-gritty, what it's like to be paid to put work on a page, what it's like when you're not paid enough, what it's like when people don't want to pay you, what it's like when you have an issue with your agent, how to communicate with your agent, how things work when you have to talk to the publisher directly because you don't have an agent, and many more topics that I can't think of the top of my head because I'm not a professional writer. Of course, I've mentioned Mur Lafferty's other podcast, I Should Be Writing, before in this series of podcast recommendations because I love it, but I Should Be Writing is all about the craft of writing and how to start a writing career, whereas Ditch Diggers is about what you do once you have a writing career and there are still some issues there. The show has really great guests. Matt and Mur are really great at hosting together. They're clearly really good friends. They have this kind of slightly surreal sense of humor about the show, and the show is also a finalist for the Hugo Award for Best Fancast this year, so if you are able to vote for the Hugos, it's maybe one to consider for your ballot. Next up, I want to recommend Midnight in Karachi, which is a show hosted by Mavish Murad for Tor.com. This is an interview show in which Mavish talks to a lot of different authors about their books when they are released. She has a lot of different guests from different backgrounds, but also she has some really big names that she's been able to interview for that show. One of the first shows that I listened by her when I found this podcast was her interviewing George R.R. Martin. In my feed right now on my phone, I can see she's got an interview of Margaret Atwood and an interview with Shauna Maguire, as well as a lot of other fantastic sci-fi and fantasy writers, new and old. And even more than how good her guests are, she is a fantastic interviewer. I first heard Mavish speak on a panel at Worldcon 2014 in London, and I was blown away. She is incredibly sharp. She takes absolutely no prisoners. She talks about a lot of issues of diversity and representation, as well as just, you know, she clearly reads all of the books before interviewing the guests, and she has some really good, insightful questions. It's always a pleasure to listen to the interviews on her show, and it always makes me want to buy the book in question. Next up is SRSLY, the pop culture podcast from The New Statesman. This is hosted by Caroline Crampton and Anna Leskowitz, 2 journalists with The New Statesman, and it has the tagline, "The show that takes pop culture seriously." Every episode, Anna and Caroline will look at a few items of pop culture that are relevant at the moment. They'll talk about films and TV and books and app games and music and all kinds of different things. And they will talk about them seriously. They will analyze them critically, which is something that I really enjoy. At the end of the show, one of the hosts will also recommend a piece of media for the other to try, and they kind of trade off that way, one week after the other. And then they talk about it the following week, so it's not just things that are in right this minute. Sometimes it's something a little bit older that one of them feels really strongly about and wants to share with the other. But overall, it is a really fun show that talks about a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily know about because I follow kind of geek and nerd culture more closely than I follow general pop culture and media. So sometimes they talk about films and TV things that I'm less interested in, but it's still nice to hear 2 really intelligent and incisive women talk about a bit of media that maybe I don't have any interest in watching, but I might be interested in kind of having a general idea or knowledge about. And finally, I want to recommend Fansplaining, which is a podcast hosted by Elizabeth Minkel and Flourish Klink, which is by, for, and about fandom. As you can probably guess by that tagline, it is all gorgeous, meta, in-depth discussion about fandom and fanfiction and what it means to be a fan and what it means to kind of recognize yourself as a part of fandom, how different fandoms intersect with one another, what issues we have in fandom. It's just very, very meta, but super interesting. It is one of my favorite podcasts at the moment. I definitely had it on my Hugo Award nomination ballot this year because I think it is always fascinating. They've been going for a couple of years, and in that time they've conducted a few surveys about fandom and what it means to be a fan. They've done a big survey about fan fiction reading habits and what people like and dislike, which tropes they prefer. And more recently they've done a survey about the definition of fan fiction, the results of which are just absolutely fascinating. I say it's my favorite and it's absolutely fascinating, and both of these statements are true because I am the giantest nerd. However, I would recommend that maybe you start listening around episode like 3 or 4, because I think the first episode or the first couple of episodes of the show aren't actually them recording a podcast, but they are a panel on which they were talking about fandom being recorded, and I know that I tried to listen to it and I couldn't really hear what they were saying. So just a word of caution in case you are like me and you are a completist who likes to go back to episode 1 of a podcast and then listen to all of the backlog until you're caught up, then maybe disregard the first episode or 2 of this show. But still, it's amazing and you should go and listen to it. So that's it. These were 4 more podcast recommendations from me. Let me know in the comments below if you have any podcasts that you love that you think I would enjoy based on the ones that I discussed this time around. I've got a couple more videos yet planned in this series, so if I haven't mentioned your favorite podcast yet, it might well be coming up. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video right about here, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button that's on my face for more videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.